Qatar has announced the end of its role as mediator between Israel and Hamas in hostage-for-ceasefire talks. Qatar has also reportedly ordered Hamas officials to leave the country at the demand of the Biden administration. ILTV's Steve Leibovitz reports that some are skeptical that either decision is final.
Qatari officials told reporters that they decided to evict Hamas due to its lack of willingness to reach a ceasefire for hostage deal with Israel. The Qataris say publicly they cannot continue mediating because neither side is willing to negotiate in good faith. Doha says if it's no longer mediating, there is no reason to allow Hamas to remain in its country. Some say the decision may not be final. Back in April, Qatar evicted Hamas officials who went to Turkey, but the U.S. and Israel asked Doha to bring them back in order to resume talks after mediation attempts in Ankara failed. Qatar has hosted Hamas in Doha since 2012, when the terror group moved its headquarters out of Damascus during the civil war. After the Hamas invasion last October 7th, the U.S. demanded that Doha shut down Hamas offices in the country, but later decided it would be useful to leave them in the city to negotiate a ceasefire agreement. Talks succeeded in a week-long truce a year ago, but have failed to secure a permanent ceasefire or the release of the remaining 101 Israeli hostages, living and dead. No timetable has been given for when Hamas will leave Doha, but it's not expected to happen immediately. A Qatari diplomat said the decision can be reversed if the sides would display a willingness to negotiate in good faith. The Qatari announcement was another blow for the families of the 101 Israeli hostages living and dead still held in Hamas captivity after 401 days. Thousands last night attended a rally marking 400 days of suffering for the surviving hostages.
And Washington is reminding Jerusalem that the deadline is coming for Israel to ensure adequate aid to Gaza or risk the supply of U.S. weapons to Israel being affected. ILTV's Devo Klein reports.
Reports are indicating that some U.S. weapons shipments have been slowed as the deadline posed by Washington approaches, conditioning weapons deliveries on Jerusalem's improving of the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip. The letter, sent on October 13th and posted online by Axios, stated that the Israeli government had 30 days to improve the humanitarian situation. This amid growing international pressure to increase aid distribution in the Strip, where relief agencies are warning of a humanitarian crisis in the north. Last month, U.S. Secretary of State Blinken and Austin wrote the letter to Israeli officials demanding concrete measures to address the worsening conditions. Austin praised the efforts of former Defense Minister Gallant, but also said that he told his successor, Israel Katz, that more effort was needed.
They have made some progress, Ellie, to answer your question. More needs to be made. But he was very deliberate in terms of going after those things that we asked him to do.
Israel opened the Kisufim crossing to help dramatically increase the aid entering south of Gaza. This in addition to the extraordinary efforts made by Israel to facilitate aid distribution to Gazans. However, despite efforts, Defense Minister Israel Katz told his U.S. counterpart that Hamas had been stealing much of the aid entering the enclave. Meanwhile, it's day 401 of the war in Gaza. The IDF has been continuing major operations in northern Gaza for the past month. Efforts are currently focused in Jabalia, as in the past days, the Division 162 killed dozens of terrorists and destroyed a Hamas weapons storage facility.
And Donald Trump has been elected as the next president of the United States, but there are still a few months until he officially takes office. In the meantime, the Biden-Harris administration is taking this time to threaten Israel with a suspension of weapons aid over the humanitarian situation in Gaza. And after over a year since October 7th, the U.S. has reportedly finally pressured Qatar to expel Hamas, and Doha has now announced it is pulling out of its mediator role. Joining me now to discuss all of this and more is Dan Dyer, the president of the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs. Dan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Pleasure.
So lots to discuss. Let's start with Qatar. There are reports, unconfirmed, that Qatar has finally agreed to expel Hamas. What brought this on now? The U.S. has a very complicated relationship with Qatar, but is this all due to Trump's election?
A lot of it's due to Trump's election because Trump is viewed in the Middle East as a strong horse, as Israel is viewed, and the Qataris recognize that they have failed over the last 13 months in order to pressure Hamas into a deal. And what this very far-reaching gesture, very far-reaching decision suggests, in contravention to what you hear in the international media, that Israel has not agreed to a deal. It was really Hamas that has never agreed to a deal. Hamas has always wanted to inflame tensions and war to make it a complete regional all-out war. That has been Hamas's intention from the beginning, and I think they've humiliated Qatar, their Qatari hosts, to the point at which Qatar said, we've had enough. And I think the Qataris are very mindful of the situation that would change with the election and the second term of President Trump.
Mm-hmm. And is this the same reason why Qatar is pulling back from a mediator role as well? And what will the impact be of this sort of pullback, the suspension?
Well, there are three really major players that can be mediators. One are the Qataris, two are the Egyptians, who have very deep relations into the Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, and PLO as well as Turkey. So the question becomes, who does the West, led by the United States and their Israeli allies, want to have as mediator? It really opens up, I think, the vista here for the Egyptians to play a much stronger role. But then again, the Americans have the ultimate leverage on the Qataris by saying, look, get this done with the Hamas. Otherwise, we can pull out our military installation from Doha, which would be a huge blow to the Qataris. They could move it to Saudi. This type of leverage the United States has, and my sense is they're fearful that the incoming administration would use that type of leverage.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and turning now to the Biden administration's threats, what do you make of this? I mean, there are a few months left to Biden's presidency. He seems to be taking a tougher stance on Israel. What can we expect to see in the coming months?
We remember unpleasantly the final 2 months of the second Obama administration, where their parting gift, if you will, was a refusal to veto a very problematic and even fraudulent resolution that called Israeli settlements illegal, which is ridiculous because it contravenes the founding charter of the United Nations. Having said that, we see that clearly President Biden going out with great frustration. Our assessment is that he's more frustrated with the Democratic Party that prevailed upon him to withdraw his nomination than he is with Israel. Now, having said that, there clearly is ongoing pressure by the U.S. administration on Israel over the humanitarian efforts. But I would remind all of us that the threats regarding the humanitarian situation in northern Gaza is a false flag issue, because Israel, in complete comportment with international law, called on all the residents of northern Gaza to leave northern Gaza and leaving only the Hamas there. And that is why any sort of shortage of humanitarian aid into the northern part of the Gaza Strip was only to smoke out the Hamas terrorists out of their holes and tunnels in northern Gaza. So the idea that Israel has slowed down humanitarian aid to the northern part of the Gaza Strip is in total comportment with international law.
And President-elect Trump has so far remained quiet on these developments, but he announced today that he would not be bringing in Mike Pompeo or Nikki Haley into his second administration. I want to hear your thoughts about this. Is this a sign that he may not pursue as much of a pro-Israel policy this time around?
That's a very good question, and we don't know the answer yet. It was somewhat of a surprise to see from an incoming president who he would not have been joining the administration. In fact, I don't remember a U.S. president announcing who would not be joining the administration, as opposed to who might be joining the administration or who would be joining the administration. But clearly, the platforming and suggestion that Mark Rubio might be the Secretary of State was a very positive thing. Senator Rubio is a very dear friend of the Jews and the state of Israel. We simply don't know who the working team will be. We do know Jason Greenblatt, who has been a fellow at the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs, as well as Ambassador David Friedman, are very, very good friends and trusted confidants of President Trump. And it really remains to be seen who will staff, his national security team, the White House team, and what will happen at state.
All right. Well, Dan Dyer, thank you so much for your analysis today.
Thank you all.
And Israelis are now being told they can once again safely travel to Amsterdam. Though this doesn't inspire much confidence after the events on Thursday night when a pre-planned mob of Muslim immigrants violently attacked Israeli soccer fans throughout the city, including women and children. All the latest in the following report.
Israeli authorities announced Saturday night that the wave of violence against Israelis in Amsterdam was over and that it is now safe for Jews to remain in the Netherlands. The assessment came after Israeli fans of the Maccabi Tel Aviv soccer team, including women and children, were violently attacked across Amsterdam on Thursday night after the Maccabi Ajax soccer game. The perpetrators, mostly immigrants of Moroccan descent, uploaded their atrocities to social media.
Vandaag gaan we op jodenjacht, jongen. Op jodenjacht.
Videos show Israeli fans brutally attacked, stabbed, and run over by cars. Others were thrown into freezing canals and ordered to shout "Free Palestine."
But it was very frightening. I saw people get beaten. I saw people get inside hotels and lock themselves. I saw people throw people into the water, the freezing water. And they drove on people, they stabbed people, and it was like 1940, the 1940s.
The attack was pre-planned and well organized, with mobs waiting for the Israeli fans at multiple points outside the stadium. Prime Minister Netanyahu compared it to Kristallnacht, the Night of Broken Glass, a Nazi terror campaign against Germany's Jewish population, in which nearly 100 Jews were murdered. Following the attacks, Israel's newly appointed Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar flew to the Netherlands to discuss the attacks and safety of the Israelis still in the country. Israel dispatched multiple flights to bring home some 2,000 soccer fans. The fans arrived on 6 flights on Friday and another 2 on Saturday after precautions were taken by Dutch and Israeli authorities to get the soccer fans safely home. Meanwhile, the Dutch government is still investigating how Israel's warnings were ignored ahead of the pre-planned attacks. Police on Saturday said that of the 62 people who were originally detained, the majority had been released and only 4 remained in custody. Yet Dutch Party for Freedom leader Geert Wilders posted on X that Amsterdam police confirmed that no one was arrested during the Islamic Jew hunt in Amsterdam Thursday night. He said all arrests were made before and during the soccer match, but not during the pogrom. His comments reinforced the claim that Amsterdam police stood idly by as the violent events unfolded. Dutch authorities insist that more arrests will be made in the coming days and that they are doing everything to ensure a safe environment for Israelis and Jews.
Let's say that I'm ashamed that this happened in the Netherlands, and it's a terrible anti-Semitic attack, and we will not tolerate, and we will prosecute the perpetrators, and I'm deeply ashamed that it could happen in the Netherlands in 2024.
And joining us now with more on the anti-Semitic attacks against Israelis in Amsterdam is Dutch Chief Rabbi Benjamin Jacobs. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
So first of all, how are you today, and how is the Dutch Jewish community feeling in the aftermath of Thursday's attacks?
Well, it's all difficult to speak for everybody, but there is a shock on one side, on one hand. On the other hand, I think people continue. And what happened is unacceptable. On the other hand, we have to realize that government is very, very protective, calling, approaching us, telling us we should not worry. And I believe this. I don't think, what happens is unacceptable. It's not something, I'm not surprised about it. I'm already calling, telling, warning during 10 years that anti-Semitism is growing and growing and growing. And before September 7, October 7, there was already a lot of anti-Semitic issues in Holland. It's growing and growing. So we had to be aware of this. Now, 7 October was a reason to make the anti-Semitism more visible. And I knew that, this football match, of course, would be will something happen. What? I didn't know. But the police was very, very alert. I was in the Portuguese synagogue where was the yearly memorial from the Kristallnacht. The amount of policemen, police cars surrounding this was amazing, amazing. Afterwards, I went to my car, in the car park, and the whole time someone was walking behind me because of the shock. Who is this? I'm alert. Was when I went into the garage, Erev Tov, yeah, someone came special from police walking behind me till I was in my car. So they are very, very protective. And what happened before the match is understandable. It's always like that, but it is a little source of anti-Semitism. During the match, it was quiet, nothing happened, and then afterwards, that was unexpected and very difficult to control. Yeah, everywhere people are joining, but we have to be very careful and not to exaggerate all these things. Also, I'm not saying what happened is acceptable. No way. And there's now at this very moment there will be coming week an investigation by a neutral organization. I spoke this morning with very high people in government, and they say, "Oh, we have to know what happened. Was it organized or was it spontaneous? And what can we do about it?" The problem is, I always say, education, education, education. But let's say in the high school, yeah, you can give education better, of course, but under the little children. But the biggest problem is the home, the houses. What do the parents tell their children about Jews? And I'm speaking now not about the regular Dutch people, but the newcomers. They are the problem.
And I want to ask you, because you've referenced the Holocaust, you've referenced Kristallnacht. Prime Minister Netanyahu has compared the attacks to Kristallnacht in Nazi Germany, and there certainly are parallels, Jews being hunted down and attacked in the streets of Europe. Yet the Jewish community at that time remained largely blind to the threat, opting to remain in Germany, and we all know, of course, what happened to them. Do you think that perhaps this is also the case today, that Jews in Europe are ignoring the warning signs once again?
Yes and no. I hope what's very important, that the Jewish people should realize that anti-Semitism hasn't gone, it's getting stronger and stronger. But there's a big difference between the time from the Kristallnacht and the Shoah, because the government is not anti-Semitic. It could be they don't agree with the politics in Israel, what I regret. I mean, who are they? Yeah, but on the other hand, absolutely, they are not anti-Semitic. I know a lot of them personal, and also the lefties who are very in favor of the Palestine, of a second state for the Palestine, etc., etc. They are not anti-Semitic. But the difference between anti-Zionist, anti-Semitic is becoming the same. It's very difficult. So, but my worry, you can't compare. Do I think we have to live here? Leave Holland. First of all, I will stay till like a captain on a ship. He has to leave the ship the last. It's a situation, a very pleasant situation, not at all. Should the Jewish people in Europe be aware of this? Sure. Yeah, and I agree. A lot of people denied what's going on. No, there's no anti-Semitism today anymore. There is. Because anti-Zionism, anti-Semitism is for the people exactly the same. So, but nevertheless, you can't compare it completely. I also don't think it's right to call it a pogrom. A pogrom is organized by government or by the church. And they say, and that day you're going to attack Jews. There was no connection between government and what happened. And perhaps they didn't act very well, the police, I don't know, but that's an investigation. And if the mayor of Amsterdam, I know personally, she's absolutely not anti-Semitic. Yes, he's a lefty. Yeah, but he's not anti-Semitic. If they did wrong, they didn't deal with it in the way it should have been, could be, but yeah, perhaps he's not a strong organizer for such events. That could be, but not anti-Semitic. And as long as we have a government what is absolutely not anti-Semitic and cares about their Jewish people and wants them to stay here, as long that's going on, I don't think we have to leave Holland.
Rabbi Jacobs, thank you so much for joining us today and speaking about this important issue.
Thank you.
And the indiscriminate attacks against Israel continue as tens of rockets were fired by Hezbollah this morning with a direct hit on a dining room in the industrial zone of Tel Aviv. The heavy barrage of Hezbollah rockets toward the Upper Galilee this morning targeted the city of Kiryat Shmona and surroundings. 3 people were lightly injured. Heavy damages were caused to the dining room in the industrial area of nearby Tel Aviv. The area had been evacuated and no injuries were reported. There were also incursions reported in Nahariya and surrounding communities. Today's attacks follow a weekend of heavy incoming rocket fire that reached the Haifa Bay. Some were intercepted and others fell in open areas without causing injuries. Over the weekend, a Hezbollah rocket directly struck a home in an Arab-Israeli village of Kfar Yasif. An eyewitness said it was a miracle that no one was injured. And the war in Lebanon continues to deepen and intensify, but at the same time, there are persistent rumors of a potential ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah in the works. President-elect Trump is reportedly urging a ceasefire with Lebanon before he enters office. More from ILTV's Steve Leibovitz.
Over the weekend, the Air Force pounded Beirut and ground forces overran and destroyed a massive Hezbollah training center located only 200 meters from a UNIFIL post in South Lebanon. The compound was used by terrorists for training and storing large quantities of weapons. The facility contained launchers prepared for firing at Israeli communities. IDF troops also found documents and instructional books detailing Hezbollah's operational methods, maps of Israel, explanations of IDF equipment, as well as tunnel shafts and additional weapons. The weapons were confiscated and the compound dismantled. During the past day, the Air Force attacked more than 50 terrorist targets in Lebanon. Air Force jets under the direction of the intelligence wing attacked the headquarters, a weapons production site, and other infrastructures used by Hezbollah in the Dahia area of Beirut. Hezbollah places its assets in the heart of civilian population as a method of warfare, exploiting Lebanese civilians as human shields. Before the attack, many steps were taken by the IDF to reduce the chance of harming civilians, including advance warnings to the population in the area. Hezbollah positions were pounded in the Lebanese coastal city of Sidon in South Lebanon, located only meters from the UNIFIL post. The Air Force also pounded Hezbollah assets in Baalbek that were intentionally placed close to Roman ruins in the area. Meanwhile, Ynet reports that U.S. President-elect Donald Trump has informed the Biden administration that he expects an early ceasefire in Lebanon. Last month, candidate Trump pledged to end what he called the suffering and destruction in Lebanon. He had gone on to say, "I want to see the Middle East return to real peace, a lasting peace."
Sagot Winery, where passion meets tradition. Nestled in the heart of Binyamin, our vineyards yield exquisite wines crafted with generations of expertise.
And now, let's take a look at the weather forecast. Light drops are expected around most of the country tonight with lows of around 15 degrees Celsius or 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow we'll see cloudy skies with highs of about 22 degrees Celsius or 72 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channel, subscribe to our newsletter, and explore our website, iltv.tv. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Ladar Gravelazi. Be well, stay safe, and thank you so much for watching.